If you're looking to get solar installed but you don't know where to start, then this video is for you, because today I'm going to reveal the top 10 things you need to know before you get solar installed. I'm Jordan from Artisan Electrics, and over the past few years we've completed hundreds of solar installs and documented plenty of them here on our YouTube channel. And our experience has shown us that there are 10 key things you need to know in order to get a quality solar installation done. So let's head up to the roof and I'll tell you about the first one. So we're here on the roof of this project that we're midway through completing. The panels are on, we're just fitting the bird protection. We've got 52 panels here. It's quite a large project at this site because they use a lot of power in this house. But the first point that I want to share with you is a really crucial one, and that's the question of how suitable is your roof for solar? What do I mean by that? There are a number of crucial factors when it comes to solar and roof-mounted solar particularly. The first thing that you want to think about is the orientation of your roof. What direction is your roof facing? Now, why is that important? Well, a south-facing roof in the UK is usually ideal because it will get the most hours of sun throughout the day. But sometimes an east and west facing roof can be really good too, because the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and you'll actually get a really long day of generation. With the sun low in the sky in the east in the morning, you're going to get that morning sun on the east side of the array and the afternoon sun on the west array. You can actually get a very long day of generation with an east-west system. Now, some people might say, but if you've got a north-facing roof, it's completely pointless. That's not necessarily true. You can get about 60% generation from a north-facing roof as you would from a south-facing roof, but it's still definitely much less effective than if you've got a beautiful south-facing roof. So that's the first thing you want to think about, is what direction is your roof facing. But there's something else that's crucial too with regards to the roof, and that is actually how much space do you have on your roof. Now, when I say how much space, what am I talking about? Well, solar panels are generally rectangular in shape. That means that you want to have ideally a rectangular shaped roof too. A nice big open space of roof that's a nice rectangle shape is perfect for fitting the optimum amount of solar panels. Now, we come across clients often where they approach us really wanting solar, but they've got very awkward roofs with lots of little triangular shapes and things like that, and it's very difficult to fit a decent number of panels. So the ideal roof is a roof like this at this property. We've got two big roofs here. This one on the main house, we're fitting 18 solar panels, and it's a nice double portrait array, and then on the garage we're also fitting 14 solar panels, and both of these roofs are ideal because they're southeast facing and they're a perfect shape. Now, the other thing that's important to think about is what pitch is your roof. Why does pitch matter? Well, the ideal pitch is the pitch that makes the solar panels face the sun as directly as possible. The optimum pitch is usually somewhere between 30 to 40 degrees. If you've got a really steep roof, like 50 degrees plus, it's going to be very difficult to fit solar panels because it's so steep, it's hard to mount the panels safely. And if you've got a very shallow pitch roof, they're not going to be facing the sun as directly in winter, for example. Now, in summer, the sun's very high in the sky, a low pitch is fine, but in winter you're going to get less direct sun on those panels and therefore less generation. So ideally, if you know the pitch of your roof, that's really helpful, and around a 35 to 40 degree pitch is perfect. So here our roof is at 44 degrees, which is great. A little bit on the steep side compared to some of the roofs we do, but absolutely fine to generate solar a decent amount throughout the year. Now, the other thing you want to consider when it comes to roof suitability is shading. You can have the biggest, most open, beautiful, excellent roof, but if it's totally shaded by tons of trees, then you're not going to get as much solar generation as if you had a nice open space around the roof with no shading at all. What happens is shade essentially blocks the amount of irradiance that's coming from the sun. So something like this big tree behind me, when the sun's behind that tree, it's going to block a lot of the sunlight that's falling on the panels, and therefore it's going to reduce the output of the solar array. If you do have some shading, it's not the end of the world. For example, in this project, we do have quite a lot of shading, but we've put optimizers on all the panels to try and minimize the effect of shading on individual panels. And what we've also done is just really oversized the array as big as possible to compensate for some of that shading. So it is possible to fit solar even if there's a significant amount of shading, but the less shading the better, and that's definitely something that any good installer will check and do a full shading map before they do your design and installation. Now, the second thing you really need to know in order to share this information with your installer to get an accurate quote and to get a properly designed solar system is what type of roof do you have? Now, what do I mean by that? Well, this is a tiled roof, so these particular tiles are what we call rosemary tiles or plain tiles, but there are so many different types of tiles out there. Or you may have, for example, a flat roof, you might have a metal standing seam roof, or if you've got a business, it might be a trapezoidal roof or some kind of corrugated roof. There are so many different types. So in order to be able to design the system properly, your installer is going to need to know what your roof tiles are in order to choose the right hooks, the right rails, the right fixings, and there's going to be a lot of structural things to check in terms of the layout of the roof, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Now, with tiled roofs in general, whether it's tiles like this or some other kind of tiles or slate, you're going to be looking at using a roof hook and rail system. That's where some tiles are lifted. Sometimes a little bit of modification has to be happening with the tiles, for example, cutting a little groove out to fit the hook underneath. Or with these particular tiles, we lift them and we put some rubber hook stops underneath to stop the hooks from cracking the tiles with the weight of the panels. With slates, you're going to need special flashings, but in general, any kind of tiled or slated roof is going to require hooks and rails. The hooks screw into the roof trusses, and then the tiles get resealed around those hooks to maintain the waterproof seal of the roof. That's really, really important. You don't ever want to see somebody offering to drill through your tiles in order to fix the system down or anything like that, because you could have some serious issues with water ingress in the roof in that particular case. With a flat roof mount system, it's slightly different. You'll have often a ballasted system, ballast being some blocks that weigh a decent amount and will hold the roof system down without having to screw into the flat roof, which will often corrupt the waterproof membrane of that roof. There are also ground mount systems, which if you don't have a suitable roof can be really great. Like at this particular project, I'll show you in a bit, we've done a ground mount array in the grass, or you can have a frame mounted array in the grass, in the garden, and that can work really well too. Now, the third thing you really need to know is what is the condition of your roof. For example, are there any broken or cracked tiles? Or worst case scenario, is the roof actually so dated that it needs replacing, in which case you might look at replacing the entire roof and putting integrated solar panels into the roof rather than mounting them on top. Now, if you're very concerned about the condition of your roof, it's probably good to get a roofer to check that over first. But all good solar installers will have a good idea about the condition of the roof when they come to do a site visit. We personally will get a drone up and we'll take high resolution pictures and videos of your roof before any installation. And we'll check everything to see if there are any broken tiles or any areas of concern, because it's better to get those repaired before you put the solar panels on, and you certainly want to take care of that now rather than later when it could start to get water leaking into your roof. Now, the fourth thing you're going to need to know about is the structural integrity of your roof. So, for example, we're up here in the loft of the garage. Now, we've fitted 14 solar panels on this roof here. And one of the first things that I check when it comes to doing a site survey, once the customer's confirmed their quote, is the structural integrity of the roof okay? In this case, it's a nice new roof. The joists are all in really good condition. They're not the thickest, but these roofs are generally built to last and also over-engineered to be able to take more weight than they actually need because of the inherent design of them. Now, if you've got an older roof with very old roof trusses, or there's any concerns about the condition of the wood, maybe cracking or splitting, bowing in the roof, anything like that, then it's really worth to get a structural engineer to check things over before you proceed in having any solar installed. Also, if you've got a flat roof, they're often not designed to put any excess weight on, so you definitely need structural engineer calculations before getting any solar put onto a flat roof, because that can be really risky in terms of the amount of weight with the ballast that's going to go on. Now, on a normal roof mounted system like this, each panel weighs about 20 to 25 kilos, so it can quickly build up. 10 panels, that's 200 kilos. Here we're about 300 kilos just with the panels, and then you've got the rails, the roof hooks, etc. We've probably put close to 400 kilos on this particular roof. So you want to know that the roof itself can take the weight, but also there's another thing to factor in, which is that the wind can actually pull the panels off the roof. So the panels and rails need to be securely screwed into the joists so that when the wind blows, the panels and hooks and things aren't actually blown off the roof. So it's not just about weight going onto the roof you've got to think about, it's off the roof as well. And that's why MCS gives specific guidelines about the distance that your solar panels should be from the edge of the roof. In general, it's 400 millimeters border you should have all the way round the edge between the solar panel and the edge of the roof, and that's to help avoid this wind uplift catching the edge of the panels and drawing them up. So when doing a survey here, what I'll be looking at is the depth of these roof trusses, the width of them, the condition of them, the length of them. I will take all the measurements so that if we need to, we can send them off to a structural engineer to get all of the weight loadings checked. I'm also looking at the spacing between the roof trusses because that tells us how often we can fix a hook. So in this case, we've done hooks every 2 joists. So that's about every 1.2 meters. We've got about 600 spacings on these joists, which is absolutely perfect. But if you had them spread further apart, that might mean that you'd need to fix a hook to every single roof truss, and that would mean more expense in terms of roof hooks. And obviously you've got to calculate all of these things in advance to have the right materials on site to do the job properly. But it's not just the condition of the wood and the structure of the roof that you need to think about, it's also this membrane here. We want to make sure that the membrane is in good condition, it's not easily going to tear or break. Sometimes if these are quite old, they can deteriorate, and we're going to have to get cables through your roof here in order to get the power out from the solar panels down to the inverter. So in this case we use this PV Ultra DC cable. We run it through the flap here, and then we install an MCS approved deck tight roof flashing, which is a nice sealed flashing that has rubber grommets in it, and the DC cables pass through that. That means that the roof is completely sealed. Even though you've got cables penetrating through the roof, it's completely sealed. There's no water going to get in, no insects going to get in or anything like that. Another thing you absolutely need to know before you get solar installed is actually how much energy do you use. To design the perfect solar system for you, it's important to match that with your requirements. For example, some people use huge amounts of energy, like at this particular property, they've got 2 big heat pumps, they've got an electric vehicle coming as well, they're going to use a lot of energy. So they're going to need a big solar PV system to match all of that energy use. Other people use very little energy, and therefore it doesn't really make sense to fit tons of solar panels when the compensation for that is not going to be very much because they're not going to use much of that energy themselves. Now, there are various ways of factoring in payback for solar and things like that, whether it's self-consumption, whether it's getting paid to export power to the grid, or using batteries to do energy trading. There are so many different ways to calculate the return on investment. But the most important factor that we always start with is how much energy are you using on site. Now, in order to know that, there are various ways. The simplest one is just to look at your energy bill. You'll have an annual estimated energy usage figure on your energy bill, usually on page 2. And that will be in kilowatt hours. If you give that figure to your installer, they can plug that into their design software, and that will help them to calculate how much solar you need and how much your self-consumption figure would be based on that estimated annual usage. It's also important to think about any future additions that you might be planning to your property. For example, are you thinking of getting an electric vehicle in the next few years? Are you thinking of changing from a gas boiler or an oil boiler to a heat pump, which is electric? Are you thinking of getting a hot tub or a sauna? All of these things will increase your energy demand and therefore increase the size of solar PV or battery system that you might need in order to cover your energy use. Now, there's a bonus tip here that I really like to share with you. In order to get the best and most accurate design, you can get your half-hourly energy usage. You can download this as a CSV or comma separated value file. It's basically like an Excel sheet that has every half an hour how much power your house was using. If you can get a year's worth of data and send that to your installer, they can plug that into their design system, and that's going to really help them to get the most accurate design. If you're not sure where to get it, ask your energy supplier. You can usually download it through your energy supplier's app or ask for them to send it to you. The other thing that you really need to consider is, do you need battery storage or not? Now, here at this property, we fitted nearly 100 kilowatt hours of battery storage to pair with the solar to help the customer to get the most out of their system. Why is battery beneficial? Well, because the sun is only shining during the day, and therefore you're only going to benefit from that solar energy when the sun's shining, unless you fit a battery. Batteries are capable of storing excess solar energy during the day, and then that allows you to use that stored energy overnight when the sun isn't shining, so that rather than pulling power from the grid overnight, you can pull power from your batteries instead. There's other things that you can do which are really clever with batteries too. For example, in winter when your solar PV system is not generating as much as you need, you can charge the batteries up on a cheap overnight rate tariff and use that cheap energy to run the house during the day, therefore massively reducing your cost per kilowatt hour of energy. Batteries really now, in my opinion, are an essential unless you're using so much energy in the property that no matter how big your array is, you're always going to be using it straight away. For a lot of commercial installations that we do, there's no point in installing battery because they're using thousands of kilowatt hours every single month, and most of that is during the day when the sun's shining and they're sucking up all of that solar energy, so they have nothing excess to store in batteries. But for most domestic situations, a battery does make sense. The size of the battery will depend on various different factors, and I'll leave a link to a video up here which tells you how to size your battery correctly. Now, I have done a whole series of deep dive videos about battery storage, so I'm not going to go into this in too much depth in this video, but there are other benefits to battery storage as well. For example, this SIG Energy system that we're fitting here provides full house backup in the event of a power cut, meaning that if the power goes off from the grid, there's a local outage, the customer doesn't even know about it, they still got their internet running, they can still boil the kettle and all of that stuff. So if you get power cuts regularly where you are, battery storage is another benefit to having that UPS backup power. Another fundamental thing that you need to consider when you're getting solar is the condition of your existing electrics. So when I'm doing a survey, what I'll usually do is check the meter box first. We want to know what size is your main cutout fuse. That fuse limits how much power you can draw into the property or export out to the grid at any given time. Most domestic properties in the UK have a 100 amp, an 80 amp or a 60 amp main supply. And ideally, if you've got a 100 amp fuse, that's the best that you can get. If you've got a 60 or 80, you might need to apply to your distribution network operator to get that fuse upgraded. Then, other than the meter box, you do need to know, do you have a smart meter? To benefit from some of the smart tariffs like Octopus Intelligent Go or others, and to get paid for your export, you will need a smart meter in order to measure those half-hourly readings and to get the most out of your PV system. So, if you've not got a smart meter yet, definitely apply to your energy provider to get one as soon as possible, as it can take a few months to get that done. The other thing you really need to know is what are the condition of your existing consumer units or fuse boxes. In this particular property, behind me, Luke is busy changing the consumer unit. Now, we've done a full electrical installation condition report on this property because the customer wanted to get everything upgraded at the same time as the solar. We've changed all 3 consumer units in this property to bring them up to modern standards. We've carried out a number of remedial works to fix some faults that we found during the inspection. And so when we walk away from this install, not only does the customer have a fantastic solar and battery system, but they've also got all of their other electrics upgraded, safe, and in line with modern standards. So that takes us nicely to our next point, which is in this small cupboard. And the question is, how much space do you have in your existing consumer unit or fuse box? Now, this one here particularly has lots of space because we just upgraded it. We're not quite finished labeling it yet, but the idea is all of these spare ways here give us space for future expansion. And that's what you want to be looking for. Aside from these breakers, the spaces that are already filled, do you have any spare spaces to add additional circuits? For many solar PV systems, they'll require at least 1, but mostly 2, maybe even 3 additional circuits. Now, some installers might just chuck an extra consumer unit next to your existing one. We prefer to integrate everything together so you've just got one consumer unit with all your circuits in, and also we check everything for safety first and make sure it's all compliant and up to scratch. But that's just the way that we do things at Artisan. More budget installers, they'll probably just install a separate consumer unit for you and kind of ignore what's there already. With the SIG Energy system that we're installing here, it actually has its own gateway where the inverters and batteries are wired off. So in that case, you don't actually need any space in your existing consumer unit, which is one particular benefit of that system. But either way, you're going to want to check your consumer unit, see if you've got any spare ways. If you don't and it's really full, it might be worth upgrading it so that you've got future space expansion for heat pump, EV chargers and all of that kind of stuff. Another thing that it's really important to consider is access and logistics. What do I mean by that? Well, there's going to be a lot of large deliveries. For example, getting solar panels and batteries delivered to the site, usually those come on pallets, which means that they might be delivered by a large lorry. So what is the access? For example, this property is down quite a narrow lane. We've had to pallet truck a lot of the materials down the lane off the back of the lorry. We also often will book a skip for these projects because there's quite a lot of packaging and waste involved. So we get a skip, so there's space on the driveway for a skip, for example. And the most important when it comes to access is the scaffolding. We're going to have to build up scaffolding around the property, around the roofs where the solar panels are going to go on. And some properties are really easy to fit scaffolding to, others are an absolute nightmare. Maybe you've got conservatories or other obstacles that the scaffolding has to be built over. So a walk around video is what we usually ask customers to provide of where the scaffolding would go, and if there's any particular access restrictions for the scaffolding, we can take that into consideration when quoting. Another really important point that you need to think about is where's the best location for the inverters and batteries. Now, a solar inverter by itself is quite a large piece of equipment. When you add batteries in, you need a lot of space. For example, here, yes, this is a big installation. We've got 2 stacks of batteries. We've got 12 kilowatt and an 8 kilowatt inverter and 11 battery modules of 9 kilowatt hours each, plus a 12 kilowatt DC bidirectional EV charger. But in general, most of our customers would need about this amount of space at least for potentially 1 stack of batteries with an inverter. So you're looking at about 1.5 meters wide by 2 meters high, roughly, of wall space that you might need. But you've got to think about where is the best place to put that. Now we're here in a garage. This is an ideal location. It's detached from the house, so from a fire safety point of view, it's great. You don't want to be installing batteries in a house or anywhere near livable rooms, fire escapes, etc. There's a whole set of guidelines called PAS 63100 that tell about that, and insurers are taking this kind of thing more and more seriously. You can put them on the outside of a property, but then you've got potential issues with water getting in and stuff like that. Although these are weatherproof systems, they can be installed outside. I always prefer to put them inside if possible. You're just going to get less wear and tear if they're inside. And in a place like a garage, it's perfect because they're easily accessible for maintenance. We can build it out so it looks really nice and neat. And overall, a garage, either detached or attached, or some kind of outbuilding, is a really ideal location. But you're going to need to make sure you've got enough wall space. Now, you might not have enough roof space to fit solar panels, in which case, if you've got a bit of land, a ground mount system like this could be perfect. Or you might decide to go down the battery only route. Either way, Artisan Electrics are here to help, and there's a link below where you can go through our virtual site survey system. It will walk you through all of the things that we've talked about today, asking you questions and allowing you to provide pictures and videos of your installation. We've designed and built this tool to help you as the customer and us as the installer, and it doesn't take long to fill out. So I hope this video has been of help to you. If it has, it really helps us if you'd like and subscribe, and why not share this video out with somebody else who you think might benefit from it. And if you have enjoyed this video, we know that you'll love one of these 2 videos up here that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. This one particularly is about 9 lies that are commonly told about solar. I think you'll find that one fascinating.